Last time we did up to stanza 38, where Krishan had started talking about Karam Yoga. Now, from stanza 39 onwards, starts the full fledged explanation of what is Karam Yoga. According to Krishan, selfless service to the right cause with the right feeling and right attitudes is a form of worship and spirituality, which is the essence of Karam Yoga. Karam Yoga is the path to moksha. Moksha, as we all know, is spiritual liberation, the to be free from the cycle of life and death, and more importantly, moksha is not just being free from the cycle of life and death; it is to go and merge back with the Maker to ascend our soul to a higher level, and this is done through work. That is why it is called Karam Yoga. It is rightful action without being attached to the fruits or manipulated by the results of that particular action, and that is the core or the essence of Karam Yoga. Basically, what happens is that as human beings, it's a natural tendency to look at the results of what we are doing, to look at what we've achieved. That is normal. But what happens is when we get too attached to the results, we compromise dharma. Dharma is not religion, dharma is ethical, rightful action. That is what he says. Karma yoga does not mean no emotions, no desires, but it means doing everything without functioning. A karma yogi acts or does his or her duty to the best of their abilities with no thought of fame, privilege, financial reward, but just with dedication to what they are doing at that moment of time. Now, you could be a homemaker, you could be working in an MNC, you could be a nurse, you could be a carpenter, you could be a garbage collector, you could be a sweeper, you could be working in somebody's house. It doesn't matter. So long as you do what you are supposed to be doing with complete dedication to the best of your ability without looking at the outcome. That is what a Karam Yogi is, and that is what a Karam Yogi is supposed to be doing. In total contrast to other forms of yoga, when you look at the other yogas, whether it is Kshatriya or Kshatriya Dharma, or yoga of knowledge, or Janana yoga or Sankhya yoga or other forms of yoga, they all focus on self development, self realization, with maybe some meditation, maybe some introspection, maybe being isolated. This is disinterested action. It is not just unique to Hinduism, it has been there in Buddhism, Jainism. But having said that, we all also know that Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, a lot of these are offshoots of Hinduism itself. So basically, in Hinduism, in the Vedantic philosophy, is what is called disinterested action. Disinterested doesn't mean I don't care about the action. It just means I am not interested in the outcome of that particular action. I am doing the action the way I'm supposed to be doing. A karma yogi is somebody who practices nishkam karma, an inward journey which is completely satisfying and fulfilling. Nishkam karma is literally without looking at the result. The reasoning is that one acts with the hope of getting rewards. The more you have the hope of getting rewards, the more likely you are to disappointment and frustration. And that disappointment and frustration leads to reactions, could be knee jerk reactions. We've discussed this before. Reaction in any form is never positive, it will always be negative, or self destructive behavior. That is one of the biggest reasons why being a karma yogi is so important, so that when we do an action, we are not getting so attached to the results of that action that that attachment to the result leads us down the path of accruing karma because there are way too many emotions attached to it. The benefits of Karma Yoga are virtually instantaneous. When every action or deed is performed without desire, it brings immediate purification to the heart and the mind, and does over time protect one from the cycle of life and death. When we do think about it, when we do an action selflessly with nothing about us in it, how good does it feel? Don't you have a smile on your face? Don't you feel so good about yourself? Don't you feel just good about the world in general? This is what Karma Yoga does for you. Apply that to every aspect of your life, and you will see that all the push and pulls will go. Bad stress will go away. We all know stress is good and bad stress. Good stress is the one that helps us achieve more, do more, get better, better ourselves. Bad stress is the one that causes anxiety, it causes blood pressure, it causes heart conditions, causes all kinds of other problems. For a Karma Yogi, there's never bad stress because there are no emotions attached. Emotions come when there's an expectation. Remove the expectation, emotions go away because there is no result that you're looking at for the work. Krishna goes on to explain that a karma yoga leads to the highest good. It is the highest achievement of self realization, which is only possible when one works with single-minded focus and determination, and the task is performed with no desire of the result. When we perform a task with the desire of a result, we create a push and a pull, and that very often leads to failure. This is also the fundamental principle of law of attraction. The first time I'd read about this, I'd actually gotten very confused because law of attraction, the way to work the law of attraction to manifest something in our lives is single-minded focus, total, you don't look left or right, you just carry on to achieve what you want to achieve. But then I realized that the Vedantic philosophy, what he spoke in the Gita, was right. If I am only focusing on the goal, what am I doing? If I'm only focusing on the result, what am I doing? Am I living in the perfect present? No, I'm living in the future because the goal or the result I want to achieve is in the future. If I am living in the future, how can my action in the present be correct? When my actions in the present are not correct, how am I going to achieve something in the future? So, absolutely, a Karam Yogi is somebody who follows the law of attraction to the T. What you are supposed to do is have, nobody is saying don't have a goal. Have a goal, have a target, think about it, focus on it, put it out there, let it go. After that, all you're doing, every action, every step that you take, is in the present, in the here and the now, where you will do what you're supposed to be doing to the best of your ability with complete dedication, complete focus. Automatically, law of attraction is activated and you will achieve that goal. But if you keep focusing on that goal, if you keep focusing on that result, are you going to achieve that result? Of course not. You're not, because you're not living in the perfect present. Single-minded focus on the task at the in hand, and success is assured. That is also what the law of attraction says. Krishna here now starts drawing a comparison between Karam Yoga and Karam Kanda. Karam Kanda is the ritualistic portion of the Vedas which lays down specific rules for specific actions for attaining specific results. People get very enamored with the ritualistic passages which show easy ways of attaining heaven. This process is desire related, so there'll always be an inner agitation because it is desire. When you have desire, there is an emotion. When there's an emotion, there's an expectation. When there's an expectation, the chances of failure are very high. And also, the higher the expectation, the higher the desire, the higher the turmoil within us. which is what the Karam Kanda does. It is ritualistic, and it says, oh, if you do this ritual, you will achieve heaven. If you do that ritual, you will achieve heaven. This process, Krishna goes to compare the two in not so many words, and he talks about how ritualistic practices are not the same as work oriented practices. Ved Vyasa, through Krishna, points out that even life in heaven is transitory, it is not static. Today you die, so called your soul goes to heaven, you live out the time frame of your good deeds, and you come right back into the cycle of life and death. So what are the ritualistic practices going to do for you? Maybe you achieve heaven, but you're going to come right back, because you've in the weight scale, the positives and the negatives, you've accrued a lot of positives, you take those, you go to heaven. Span, you have completed the time span for the positives, lived out your life in heaven, and then you're going to come back to be reborn. When you become a Karam yogi, what happens is you are transcending this process of cycle of life and death. The idea is to not have those accruals, not even go to heaven. Just transcend life and death, get out of that cycle to ultimately achieve moksha. But there is a point here that even if you do the Karam Kanda part of it, which is ritualistic practices, even though those ritualistic practices are not going to give us that absolute moksha, but when you're performing them with absolute dedication, with absolute focus, it is the first step, the yoga of knowledge, because you are then doing it to gain the knowledge. You're not just doing the ritual as a ritual with the means to an end to just go and go to heaven at the end of it. You are actually doing it with dedication, which means you partly do become a Karam yogi by doing this. Krishna carries on when, after explaining to Arjun the ineffectiveness of blind obedience to Karam Kanda, he tells him to transcend from the three gunas. Guna is a concept in Hinduism which literally means quality or attribute. All of us are born with certain gunas. This is a part, the gunas are a part of the Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya philosophy is the duality of Indian philosophy. It talks about where you have the Advait Vedanta, which is talking of singularity, which is that we rise above the duality. We've done this extensively in the previous chapters, where we rise above the duality, we rise above the pair of opposites to go to singularity, because then and only then can we merge with the maker. There is also the duality philosophy which exists very much in our scriptures. This is what is called the Samkhya Yoga, or Samkhya is the dualistic Astika school of Indian philosophy, where it talks of two independent realities, the Purusha, the consciousness, and the Prakriti, which is cognition, mind, and emotions. We are not going to get into Samkhya philosophy here, because that will be a complete session in its own right. If you want to talk about it more, if you want to understand it more, please let me know and I can run off a separate session on it. But here we will get back to the gunas. According to our philosophy, there are three gunas. There's Sattvic, we've all heard of them. Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. Sattvic is the quality of balance, harmony, goodness, purity, constructive creativity, positivity, peacefulness, and virtue. Rajasic or Rajas gun is the quality of passion, activity. It could be good or bad either which ways. Self-centeredness, egoism, individualization, drive, movement, and dynamism. That is why a lot of times they would say that, like a king had Rajasic qualities because he had all of these qualities. And the last is the Tamasic quality, which is imbalance, disorder, chaos, anxiety, impurity, destruction, delusion, negativity, inactivity, apathy, inertia, lethargy, violence, and ignorance. All these guns are present in all of us. The proportion is different. All of us carry the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic guns inside us. There are times when we are very, very lazy, tamasic. There are times when we are very aggressive, rajasic. There are times when we are so positive, so full of peace, so full of harmony, sattvic. What in every human being, the proportion of the guns will change. The interplay of these guns define the character of someone or something. That is why no two people are alike. Even though they carry the same tattvas, the same gunas, the same everything, but it is the proportions that change, that vary, that define an individual being. Going above the Rajasic and the Tamasic temperaments and staying with the Sattvic is a way to go beyond the mind and the intellect and discover the supreme self, the Brahman inside us, that Atma inside us, the soul inside us, which is the true real. The way to ascend them, Krishna explains this so beautifully. Actually, Ved Vyasa explains it so beautifully. Is it's explained in the Vedas, it's explained in the Gita, that every activity in this world is guided by two prime motives: acquisition for purpose of possession, preservation of possessions acquired. So, step one, acquire something because we want to possess it, and then safeguard what we have acquired. So, have you noticed how somebody will spend his entire life trying to get rich, and then he gets rich, then he spends the rest of his life trying not to lose that money and stay rich? Two basic principles which everybody is governed with. These are the two main motives in most of our action. Krishna tells Arjun to rise above these two motives, to forever stay in the sattvic frame of mind and not give in to the senses, because it is the senses that take us down this path. The way to keep ourselves detached from these ideas with constant awareness of the divine self within us, the real within us, is what the Gita is showing. Sattvic properties, sattvic characteristics help you go beyond the other gunas to attain freedom. And this is what Krishna is telling Arjun to do. While doing his duty, do it with a sattvic temperament. Also, a part of being a karam yogi. Krishna says that for a person who has realized the self or truth, non duality, concerning absolute reality, the Karam Kanda part of the Vedas become useless because you're already in possession of the highest knowledge possible. When you have that knowledge, why would you look at ritualistic things? Apply it to today, apply it to now. Every time you go to a temple. I mean, there are people I know who fast 200 days out of 365 days in a year. आज तीज है, आज सावन है, आज मंडे है, आज फ्राइडे है, आज थर्सडे है, आज गुरु पूर्णिमा है, आज सोनसो पूर्णिमा है, आज शिवरात्रि, आज ये है वो है. Ritualistic completely. Who is gaining? And people are following those rituals so blindly. Who is gaining out of those rituals other than the pandit who's getting nice, fat, and rich? Nobody is gaining it, because not one. Personal belief, I am not very fond of the kanda kanda karma for the karma kanda, sorry, for one simple reason. I don't believe in rituals unless somebody can explain to me why a ritual, what is the reason for a ritual. I have never understood why I was asked to keep a Karwa Chauth ka fast. By me fasting for one day, how is it giving longevity of life to my husband? When I fast that one day, all I can think of is the fact that I'm thirsty, I've not been able to have water, I'm hungry, I've not been able to have food. Where are their positive sentiments? For a lot of women I know who've been doing the Karwa Chauth, and I've been watching this as a child, like these groups of women sitting together. All they could talk of was going to the beauty parlor to get their hair done, to get their makeup done, buy new clothes, to dress up, look gorgeous, get mehndi put. Interspersed with all that dressing up and all of that were complaints of how hungry they were or how thirsty they were. Where was there the thought that I am doing this for longevity of my husband, to give him a longer life? Nothing. How does that ritual work? This is why I have never been fond of ritualistic practices. Give me the knowledge. I would go the Karma Yogi path any day, any time. I would try path of knowledge any day, any time. Ritualistic kind of doesn't work for me. Don't know if it works for all of you, but it does not work for me. When I see all these rituals that keep happening all the time, the only question that I have is why? What are you achieving by going into that temple, feeding well-fed priests again and again, putting money there? For I have been to temples. I've been to, there's this temple in Rajasthan. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's supposed to be one of the richest temples of the north, second only to Tirupati. I saw the amount of money that temple was collecting. That same money paid to the poor, paid for education of somebody, food in somebody's house, clothes for somebody else, warm clothes in winter, would have so much use, so much better use. And I am 100% positive that that God up there is not interested. He doesn't. He has gone past the dualities. He's gone past these pairs of opposites. He's gone past everything. He is the supreme being. Call him God, call him energy, call him anything you want. You really think he cares whether you put money in that temple, or you put, you lagao a tika, you fast for 10 days? Doesn't matter. Any ritual, unless it is followed with knowledge, unless it is followed with an understanding, like Krishna said in the passage earlier, that even karma kanda, so long as it is done, the rituals are performed for purity of mind, for introspection, to become better as people, will do the same job will be your first step on the ladder to understand becoming a karam yogi, or to understand samkhya yoga, jnana yoga. But just blind obedience to rituals, and this is what he is telling Arjun, that somebody who has knowledge, who is already on that path, the karma kanda is of no use. He's not ridiculing it. He is just saying different paths. Again, beauty of Hinduism, beauty of our culture, that there is something for everybody. You just have to know which is your path and why you want to take that path and what you want to achieve when you take that path. It is ritualistic. If it works for you, go for it. Doesn't work for you, doesn't work for me. As a person, doesn't work for me. Krishna says, Karam karo, phal ki chinta na karo. One of the most used, reused phrases of the Gita. Karam karo, phal ki chinta na karo. Do your work without concern for the results. The essence of a Karam Yogi. It is probably one of the most quoted verses of the Gita. It contains the essential principle of disinterestedness in action. Krishna's advice here is not to waste the present in imaginary fears about the future, but to live in the here and now. The future will take care of itself. He tells Arjun to act, knowing the cause of action is correct, and act to the best of his ability with all his heart, mind, and soul, and to forget about the outcome. Now, here, look at it. Arjun was supposed to fight that war. The war was dharma against adharma, good against evil. The cause was correct. He knew that that is why he had come onto the battlefield. Now he got scared. He wasn't behaving like a Karam yogi. He got scared of the outcome of that war. He got scared of losing face. He got scared of all the death and destruction that will happen. All those dialogues that he had given in chapter 1. Everything creating a lot of push and a pull, a lot of fear. What was he doing? He was looking into the future. He was looking at the outcome of the war. When he was looking into the future, here's a perfect example. When he was looking into the future, what happened to his present? It came to a complete standstill. There was no present because he had come to a state of inaction. That is why this philosophy, karam karo, phal ki chinta na karo, do your actions, do your deeds, forget about the results, because when you start worrying about the results, there is a problem. There are 4 main guidelines to becoming a karam yogi. Your concern, step 1, your concern is with the action and action alone. You have no concerns with the results. You should not become a tool for gaining a desired result of a given action, because that is going to create bondage. And fourth, last but not the least, these 3 ideas does not mean don't take action. It does not it's not advocating inaction. The advice is to make a worker release himself from his mental anxieties and make him aware of his divinity through work and work alone. The work itself is his reward. What is the ultimate reward? Don't care, don't know, don't care, not worried about it, not focusing on it. The work you're doing is the reward in itself. Get satisfaction out of a job well done. By performing actions in this manner, one gets peace and vasanas are reduced. We'll get into vasanas later. When you come to this, when you do not work with results in your mind, you actually do work, and you work with dedication, you work with focus. Your classic example is, when you are sitting and doing something which is not very complex, not very intricate, you're actually, like reading a book. Now you pick up, for those of you who are passionate about reading, I love reading. I don't pick up a book to read because of what I'm going to gain from it. I read the book for the sheer pleasure of the book I'm reading. And because I'm reading it for the sheer pleasure of the book I'm reading, it doesn't matter whether it's a Mills and Bones, or it's a Barbara Cartland, or it's one of the Vedas, or it's the Gita, or it's a science fiction. It doesn't matter. It's just the pleasure of reading that book. No results, no goals, no aims, no nothing. Such a beautiful thing. Just lying in bed, reading for no gain. Try that for a lot of other things in your life, and you will realize that you actually enjoy what you're doing at that present moment of time, because you're living in the perfect present. You're living in the here and now, which is what we are supposed to be doing. Something we all forget about is that I don't know if I'm going to take my next breath. Then why am I so focused on the result of an action I'm doing right now? Should I not only focus on the action, not the result? I don't even know if I'm going to be alive to see that result. Then why the hell am I focusing on the result? I should just focus on the action, because all I know right now, my here and now, I am doing a task, I am doing it right now. I don't know if I'm taking my next breath. I don't know if I'm alive for the next second. When I don't know any of that, how does it matter what the results are? Doesn't make a difference. Just do your actions. You know, From experience again, every time I have worked completely focused on the result or completely focused on the action, I have failed. I have not done well because I have not focused completely with dedication on the task at hand. I would be sitting and dreaming about the future, sitting and making plans for the future, totally forgetting that that future is going to exist only if I take steps today. So, from experience, I realized way before I understood law of attraction, way before I understood Karam yoga, way before I understood Vedic philosophies, I understood one simple thing, and that came out of failures. That every time I focused on a result, what I got was a zero. When I focused on the action, when I focused on the job I was supposed to do, the results I got were brilliant because it wasn't result oriented. I wasn't working towards a result. I was just working to the best of my ability, doing whatever it is that I was supposed to have been doing. So Krishna explains to Arjun again and again, and I have also realized something in the Bhagwad Gita. A lot of things are being repeated again and again and again. I think they realize that we are quite stupid. So unless you hammer a point in, इतनी मोटी बुद्धि में जाने नहीं वाला. So उसको ना इतना repeat कर दो that even if you don't want to, you will remember it. Now, after explaining what Karam Yoga was, Krishna starts explaining to Arjun the technique, and it's discussed very exhaustively, the technique of becoming a Karam Yogi. He says it's a complete erasure of individuality with its false sense of values. Basically saying, take your ego, put it in a box, put it away. It's not important, it is not needed. Here, the ego that they're talking of is the ego that comes from, the ego that gives rise to arrogance, it gives rise to the I, me, myself. So put it all away. Become neutral to the ups and downs of life. It is only when one becomes unconcerned with failure or success, that person has the equanimity to become free from virtue or vice, good or bad. It is karma is only accrued, and by karma here we are talking of the essence of what we accrue, the good or the bad, depending on our actions, our thoughts, and our beliefs. Karma only accrues to a person when he identifies with the body, with the unreal. We've been through this exhaustively again before, that what we are facing in the present, the world, the body, the universe, it's all unreal because it is transient. It is when we identify with this body that I have, this body that my soul is wearing in this birth. When I identify too much with this body, I get too attached to it. When I get attached, I have emotions. When I have emotions, karma gets accrued. For a Karam yogi, a person who is beyond these attachments, who is beyond any of these, who's away from these push and pulls, who's away from the duality of life, there is no karma because there is no vice or virtue. It has no effect on him and he will not accrue any karma. Krishna says, devote yourself only to the yoga of equanimity. If you do your duties, maintaining this evenness of mind, not worrying about success or failure, again, we can see the duality in place, then what you're going to do is your focus is only going to be on work. Work that otherwise becomes a burden actually becomes freedom. Work becomes worship. We've heard this phrase so many times, make your work your worship. This is what Krishna is trying to explain here to Arjun, that work becomes worship. Then it becomes true devotion. It becomes true bhakti. Bhakti, devotion is not just to a god or to a temple. Devotion to your work, bhakti to your work. It is concentrating on the task at hand with complete single-minded focus. That is devotion, true form of devotion. When you have that devotion, you rise above accruing good or bad credits. What happens here is when we practice this sense of equilibrium, this sense of poise, this sense of equanimity, success and failure don't matter. Here, there is a very important difference because Krishna does not define yoga as skill in action, but explains yoga as equanimity in action. That means free from success or failure, not skill in action. Skill in action, even a robber can be very skilled. He is not saying that. He is saying equanimity in action, a sense of equilibrium without getting worried about success or failure. Attachment happens when we regard ourselves as the instrument, not when we regard ourselves not as the instrument, but the actual doer of an action. When we start understanding that we're just performing things, we are not actually the doers. Even uninspired, ordinary chores can become very inspired. When we work with equanimity, when we work without worry about success or failure, then what happens is we work with dedication, we work with love, we work with devotion, we work to the best of our ability, and we forget the I, me, myself in the process. When we forget that I, me, myself, that is when we rise above and we come to a state of godliness. That is when we come to that absolute state of devotion, and we forget that it is not we who are doing it. We are just instruments. It's like the scalpel in a surgeon's hand. The scalpel is not doing the cutting. It is the instrument in the hands of the surgeon which is doing the cutting. This is where we rise above. We just become channels. A way to explain this, and I will come into this a little later, what he's trying to say. But we healers follow this principle all the time. When we are healing, we don't exist. If today, as a healer, I sit down and I sit down as me, as Seema, I can't send out that healing. If I worry about the result, I again can't send out the healing. The only way healing can go is when I sit down to heal and I don't exist. I draw energy from the universe. I'm like that little straw, drawing that energy from the universe and passing it on, channeling it on to somebody else. I'm as unimportant as that straw. When the work is done, it is picked up and discarded, and it is absolutely okay to be that way. I know the day I sit down to heal and I'm worried about the results, I can't heal because then my worry, I'm not single minded focus, I'm not being able to send that healing out. So, healers understand this, what Krishna is trying to explain very, very beautifully. He goes on to say, attainment of knowledge of the self, about that Brahman, that Atma, the soul inside us, through purity of heart is obtained by performing actions without expectations of its fruit. This is a siddhi in its own right. Siddhi literally means complete understanding or enlightenment. So, when we understand Karam Yoga and we apply it to every aspect of our life, we will attain siddhis. We will become enlightened. Failure to get this knowledge is when we do actions with the expectation of results. Action performed to gain a result are the cause of birth and death, the cycle of birth and death. Because when we do actions, which are result oriented. We add vasanas to them, we add thoughts to them, we add emotions to them. And that is when we get sucked back into the cycle of life and death. Clinging to fruits of actions creates vasanas. If actions are performed without desire for the fruits, one is released from the bondage of birth and death and can ultimately achieve birth. The reason why we consider the cycle of birth and death as a bondage, because each subsequent life comes from the life before. So the karmas we did, the actions we did, the emotions we attached to those actions, the vasanas we created are what we carry forward into the next life. And that is how we have a next life. So to not have that next life, we don't have to create the karma, we don't have to create the vasana. The moment we don't do that, we automatically get free from the cycle of life and death. If I have this life and I've not created any karma in this life, I don't have another life to go into, because I have dealt with all of it in this life, not created any further, and there is no further accrual for me to take a next life to deal with it again. This is what happens when you become a Karam Yogi. You can go the Jnana Yoga path, which is through the path of knowledge, but that for most people is a lot harder to do. The Karam Yogi path is way easier for all of us to achieve. He says, knowledge is superior to action. The implication is that selfless action purifies the mind and prepares the individual for higher meditation. And through that, he ultimately achieves the self, realization of the self, or knowledge of the self. And this is also called Buddhi Yoga. So you take the Karam Yoga path, you come to a point where you become so selfless that you automatically move towards knowledge, and it is through that knowledge that you attain that ultimate belief, ultimate bliss, not belief. One of the basic principles of Karam Yoga is complete removal of one's individuality and total identification with God's will. It is only through this that a worker or a person becomes free from the joy or grief that results from success or failure of work. This is what is called Arpit Karna. You've all heard the words Arpit Karna, renunciation, giving up of yourself. A true Karam Yogi. Now, this is something, these are words. It takes a long time to understand that when you say Arpit Kar Diya, it is not that you become a puppet to God or you become a puppet to the universe. It is coming from that absolute. Well, okay, here's my meaning of what I believe Arpit Karna means is that absolute, complete surrender of ego. I am nobody. I know nothing. All I know is that I don't know. And that is the point from where I come. And when I say Arpit Karna, it is surrendering myself to a higher knowledge, a higher source, a greater form of energy. And that is Arpit Karna. And when you surrender yourself so completely, so totally, there is no desire for result, there is no goals, there is nothing. It is just, I know, and I know, like it's infallible, this faith, that my feet will never go on the wrong path. If by mistake they do, I will be guided back to the right path. Whatever happens, happens for the best. That energy up there, that ultimate parent can never want wrong for me. Impossible. It is just not a possibility. So whatever happens will happen for the best. Everything will be great. Even the periods that are not so great or you're going through something, they will pass and something better will happen. This is Arpit Karna. And this becomes that ultimate Karam Yogi where you are not worried about results, you're not goal driven, you're not path driven, you're not nothing driven. You just do your actions that you're supposed to be doing to the best of your ability with complete dedication, complete focus, and surrender your ego. It is when you don't surrender your ego, when there's still a lot of I, me, myself inside you. That is when there's so much of attachment. There's so much of attachment to results. There's so much of attachment to, oh, I want fame, I want name, I want money, I want this, I want that. So much of I that comes into it. With each and every I that comes into it, it creates emotions. A lot of them can be very negative emotions. When those negative emotions are created, as distress comes in. When that distress comes in, vasanas are created. When vasanas are created, if I can't fulfill those vasanas or that karmic debt I am accruing in this lifetime, I'm going to have to take another lifetime to go through it, and the whole cycle is going to start again and again. And this is what he's trying so hard to explain. So many forms of being a karam yogi you can, but bottom line, to truly become a karam yogi, you have to surrender. When you surrender that ego, when you surrender that I, when you have absolute faith and trust that galat nahi hoga. It cannot go wrong. It cannot go bad. Even if there's a bad period, this too shall pass, which we've seen from experience. This too shall pass. When you have that faith, you have that belief, it is so easy to surrender. Kaam karo, halki chinta na karo. Doesn't just become a maxim. It actually becomes your mantra. The way this too shall pass becomes a mantra, so does this. What he says is, when does one attain the wisdom that is the result of the purity of mind induced by karam yoga? These are questions that are happening in Arjun's mind. Krishna is answering the questions whether they are said aloud or not. He is answering every possible question about what is karam yoga. He says delusion is the non-discrimination between self and non-self. We've been through this very exhaustively in the previous chapters, where we have talked of how you come to a point of delusion when you don't believe, when you don't understand the real and the non-real. And when you don't understand it, then your mind turns towards the sense objects. And this is what creates attachment for the body, for the family, for kinsmen, for objects, for material, for property, for house, for money. And when the intellect crosses into this delusion, a lot of pain is felt. We saw that with Arjun. He came to a point of standstill. But if you allow your intellect to take you beyond this delusion, is when purity of mind is achieved. And you will enjoy everything without worrying about the future. You will exist in the perfect present, in the here and now. The mind gets agitated due to continuous stimuli. If you look around you, there is constant stimuli. There is TV, there is phone, there is the internet, there is the laptop, there is the iPad. I mean, there are 10,000 things that are giving you so much of stimuli from the external world. And all these are coming in through the sense organs. When an individual, in spite of all these disturbances, in spite of all the stimuli, all these agitation, does not lose his cool, his serenity, remains concentrated, he is considered to have attained yoga or samadhi or self-realization. What is samadhi? We've all heard a lot about samadhi. There is a kind of samadhi when you go so deep inside yourself that you go into a meditative plane where your heartbeat comes down to non-existent, your breathing comes down, your pulse comes down. But there is also samadhi, which is not the loss of consciousness, but the awareness of the highest form of consciousness, God consciousness, the consciousness when you are connecting with the super consciousness, which we all know exists out there. And this kind of samadhi is only achieved when we understand the real and the unreal. Then and only then can you achieve this level of super consciousness. Takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of doing, not very easy to achieve, but achievable nonetheless. A step towards this is when we act with equanimity, which is more important than the action itself. Equanimity, as you know, and we've talked about it before, is when we are not worried. The action is, we are just doing an action. We are not worried about how well we're doing it, how well we are not doing it. We are doing it to the best of how we know how to do it. What he's trying to say is karma means action, buddhi is how to act. So, Buddhi Yoga is the method by which we go beyond Vedic ritualism, do our duty without any attachment for the results of our actions. That's Buddhi Yoga. I started this session off by saying it is not just important to have the knowledge, it is equally important to know when and how to apply that knowledge, or when and how not to apply that knowledge. There are times when we apply knowledge and it should not be. And there are times when we need to know what is the right knowledge to apply. Buddhi Yoga. So you have Karam Yoga, which is action, action coupled with intellect becomes even greater. So you have Karam Yoga, you have Buddhi Yoga, made the two, you're sorted. Arjun asks Krishna a question, which he says, how is a man of steady wisdom described by others? And the second part of the question he asks is, how does the influence of wisdom manifest itself in the actions in the outer world when he comes out of samadhi? Now, the last 18 verses of the chapter, so we are already at verse 54 or so. The last 18 verses of the chapter only talk about Krishna giving an answer to Arjun. He explains the qualities of a self-realized soul. He does a how to deal with stress 101. He shows you how to be a stress-free person. This actually could become the next 18 verses, can actually become a thesis on how to lead a stress-free life. He talks about, from a spiritual angle, eliminating every kind of stress so that you will never have to take any antidepressants, any anti-anxieties, and those are the next 18 verses of the Gita. He does not talk about how a wise man talks, sits, walks. He explains the characteristics of a wise person and what makes a person wise. These verses are amazing for two reasons. They explain exactly what wisdom means in everyday life with knowledge that can help you lift yourself spiritually and otherwise. That is why these 18 verses are the most recited verses of the Bhagwad Gita. We will do the rest of this in the next session.